The key to successful leadership today is influence, not authority. Kenneth Blanchard said that one time. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, Episode 18, The Power Influence with Brent Kelly. Hey everybody, it's your host and founder here, Scott McCarthy from the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. Welcome back. Got another great show lined up for you today. If this is your first time listening to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, you come across a podcast which is essentially designed to make you a better leader and follower through just practical and simple advice. And for all those who are returning, welcome back. Welcome back to another great episode. So before I dive into today's episode and talk about the episode and the guests that I got lined up for you today, I just want to go over a few resources and things out there and to make you aware of if you're not already aware of it. And the first one is I'd like to bring your attention to the best book section of the Moving Forward Leadership webpage, movingforwardleadership.com. And in that section, you're going to see just 5 books in there, okay? The first book, believe it or not, is actually written by myself, The 9 Foundations of Leadership, which is, for me, the basis of which every leader needs to make their leadership on. So there are 9 foundations in there, which I believe is a great starting point for all leaders to set their foundation, and then from there you can go ahead and build upon your leadership style. Following that one is Leadership by General Rick Hillyer. General Rick Hillyer was once upon a time the Chief of Defense Staff for the Canadian Armed Forces. This book is an excellent read for anybody, not even just military, but anybody at all. Following along that as well, I have The 360-Degree Leader by John C. Maxwell. And I found this one to be a great all-around leadership book. So if you haven't had a read of that one, you should swing by and check it out. And then next up is Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And Simon Sinek right now is definitely on the leadership forefront, I would say. He's everywhere, and his name is definitely out there. And this one just revolves around why. And you'll hear me talk about why a lot in this podcast. In fact, my first episode was actually labeled Why. So have a look at that one. And then finally, The Power Win by Michael Brous. And this one is different. It's not about leadership at all. In fact, this one is about when you should do certain things for peak performance, i.e., when's the best time for you to be analytical? When's the best time for you to be writing emails? When's the best time for you to be doing God knows everything, from having a nap to making love with your partner to being super critical and analytical in your job. So why I recommend that one is just so you can be at your peak, know when to be at your peak. It definitely helps. I've read it. I have my own copy, and I definitely use the thoughts and principles within that book, and they definitely help me throughout the day. So next thing I'd like to bring your attention to is our Facebook group, and that is at facebook.com/group/moving forward leadership. And the whole goal of this group is develop a leadership community, okay? To bring people together, to ask the questions that they have burning, all right? To seek answers, to provide advice, to help others out, so on and so forth. I think it's a great resource out there, frankly. Right now, if you were to seek out one of these types of groups, you'd have to go ahead and join up what they refer to as a mastermind. And these things are going to cost you hundreds upon hundreds of dollars to monthly even to be part of, which is something I personally not against. I understand why they're out there, but I believe that there is definitely a need for something free for the masses that necessarily don't have the money to pay for that amount. So this group is here designed for people who want to discuss leadership and have these hard conversations, these tough conversations that they need to have. Of course, as well, I am on Facebook as well, the Moving Forward Leadership. You can hunt us down at facebook.com/moving forward leadership. Follow me and like me there, because I go ahead and push out various things that you may not necessarily find anywhere else, okay, on there. And then, of course, finally is my Twitter account, which is MFL_podcasts. And MFL standing for, of course, Moving Forward Leadership. One final thing which I would definitely want to hit on, and that is my Patreon account. So Patreon is developed there to help artists like myself basically get paid for what we do. And the whole goal of this, and you do get some things in return, and there are 3 different levels in there. I won't bore you with the whole details here, but if you are interested, if you like what you hear from the podcast and from everything in which I'm doing, and you want to basically turn around and give back to me, feel free to go to patreon.com/MFL, as in Moving Forward Leadership, _podcast. And in there you can see the 3 different levels of basically sponsorship, support, and what you get in return for that support. So you're not just donating money per se. As well, I haven't done it yet, but I do plan on putting in some goals and stuff of what my plans are for the money. No, I'm not just going to pocket them. In fact, I'm going to use the money, which I get from the Patreon account, to help make everything better. Better equipment, better website, proper hosting services for everything, so on and so forth. Because right now I'm doing everything bare bones as much as I can, because it is very much, I won't lie, it's very much a hobby. I'm not making any money out of this right now. I'm doing this just because I enjoy doing it and and like what I do. But at the same time, it definitely would be nice to bring us a little bit of cash so that I can actually make it more professional, a better service for you, the listeners out there. Thousands of you that are listening out there, which is still mind-blowing to me. So all that to say is, I'm going to sum this up one last little bit, and that is, if you do really enjoy what you're doing, there is one thing that you can do for me besides going to Patreon and pledging some support. And this one is totally free, and that is leaving reviews wherever you listen to this podcast. Reviews are podcasters' gold. They help bump our ratings. It helps us get better exposure, and in the end, it helps us become more open to other listeners, i.e. more listeners find out about us and then start listening as well, which in then turns helps them. So where can you do this? Well, you can do this wherever you've listened, basically. And this podcast is hosted on 4 different places, and those are Shout Engine, Google Play Music, iTunes, and Stitcher. All right. However you're listening, you can go through your podcasting app, or you can go through one of those 4 services and go ahead and leave me a review. That would be absolutely much appreciated, because in the end, then that's going to help out people find this podcast and help me get more exposure. Okay? So, what's going on today? Today, we're talking about influence, and I have a great guest lined up for you today. In fact, we've been trying to get this sorted out for quite some time, myself and Brent. But today, Brent is here, and we're talking all about influence. And Brent is a highly experienced leadership coach, speaker. He goes and does professional speaking, so on and so forth. You'll hear more about his story when we get into the interview. But his background is about more along the lines of insurance. But again, you can apply everything, right? Principles of leadership are applicable no matter where you work or where you operate, whether it is a nonprofit, whether in the military or government, and so on and so forth. Principles are all the same. It's a matter of how you apply them. So Brent's going to give us a lot of great advice here on influencing and how to influence. So, ladies and gentlemen, hope you enjoyed the show. Sit back and have a listen to my interview with Brent Kelly, all about influencing others. Brent, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It's great to have you out here.
Hey, I am so excited to be on. Good to speak with you.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of time in the making, that's for sure. But nonetheless, we are here. I guess the first thing I like to do is, give yourself a chance to tell my audience out there exactly who you are and where you're at, and basically how you've gotten to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, I should probably first of all mention, as we just talked about before we hopped on live here, was that I'm a husband. I'm a father of four. So that's where I start. So I'm first a father, but my background in the business world, Scott, I spent 15 years as an active property and casualty agent. So my life has been in the insurance world, for better or worse, right? Whether you like it or hate it, that's where I spent my career. And some point, and I don't know the exact year, there was always a calling deep within inside me somewhere that got stronger as I moved forward in my insurance career, that I wanted to be a full-time speaker and a trainer and a coach and write. And so I started doing some blogging in 2011, which led to some training things. And one thing led to another is that I really kind of found my passion and my calling in working still in the insurance profession, but as a full-time speaker, trainer, and coach. That's what I do today. I do keynotes, I do training sessions, I do a lot with the insurance industry and financial services. I focus primarily on leadership. I focus on communication and connection, and really how to influence others in a positive and ethical way. And so that's really my story. I real quickly to share this, that part of that came is I used to go to these insurance conferences, which again, if you're not insurance, nothing sounds more exciting, right, than go to an insurance conference. I mean, talk insurance, talking shop. Yeah, giddy up, right? And I would go there and I would talk to these people. And again, not everybody, but you'd talk to people and they were just like, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of doing this and hopefully I get through, and, I'm doing
just
my
going
best.
through the grind, right?
And I'm like, dude, like either leave or find a way to make this worth your time, right? And so I really, one of the things that I focus on, and it's not cliche, hopefully. I mean, I guess maybe it is, but I want to maximize people's potential. I see not where they're at, but where they could be, and to kind of find that spark within them to see more in themselves than they often see, alone. And so that's really my passion and purpose, and when I do speaking and training.
I don't think that's cliche at all. I think anybody who's in the, kind of the world that we're in, you, me, everybody else that touches the leadership, leadership training or leadership development role, their whole passion and goals are to, help inspire and develop and motivate people, and not just go, let them go through the daily grind of, just 4 o'clock's coming.
Oh, it's Monday. It's Tuesday. It's hump day. I'm like, geez, and so, and I get it. I've been there. I get it to a degree, but it's like, listen, our most precious asset is our time.
Oh, totally.
Right. And if you're not going to value it, like, we're a speck of time, right? Again, another cliche, but a speck of time in this universe. So do something with it, right?
Do something, exactly. Don't just, go through it. So you kind of hinted at, and you've developed your lines through influence and influencing others. And I guess one of my first questions we'll have to kick off of, and I always, my biggest thing is the explanation of why. So can you talk about why we would want to influence others in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, it does, all kind of start with that. And I think, again, if you're an avid podcast listener, you read books, I mean, whether it's through Simon Sinek or anybody, right? We always hear the start with why, and it is foundational. But here's the reality. It's easy to say, what's your why? It's hard to really come up with a clear answer.
Oh, right? Yeah, totally.
Oh, yeah, I know. I need to find my
one
why.
That makes sense and relates to the other person that's asking the question, right?
Absolutely. So when I work with, whether I'm working with, again, I work a lot in the insurance space, but if it's an insurance agency owner, for example, or an insurance sales producer, I ask the question, what's your why? Why do you want to lead and influence? Whether it's your team, whether it's your client, whether it's your community, right? Really hone into that. And so that's one of the biggest things that I do when I work with an individual client or a group, or I'm speaking, is to really have people tap into that. I'll just share, if I could, just a real quick story. So we were actually, again, it's kind of funny. We were talking before we hopped on live about my vice, which is my monster drink that I'm
drinking right now.
Which I'm drinking right now, right? So I know it's not good for me, but it's my vice. And the reason why I say that is that generally I'm a pretty healthy guy. I work, I watch what I eat. All that being said, I try to exercise every day. But after my second child, I'm a dad of 4, but after my second child, I had gained about 35 to 40 pounds. I was always a size 33 waist, and all of a sudden I got to 34 and 36, and I was like, okay, that's not good. And my mom was like, Brent, don't worry, you fill out when you get older. I'm like, man, I'm not filling out. I'm just getting big, you know? And then I had a day where I couldn't get my 36s and I had to go to 38, and I'm like, that's enough. So so if any of you guys watch, the infomercials or whatever, I was sitting there in 2007. I'm watching the infomercial for P90X.
Oh, great program.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. So I get P90X, and I'm ordering it, and I'm all excited, and it comes in the mail, and I'm like looking at the DVD, and I'm looking, it's like at the end of the week, I'm like, Monday is going to be the day I'm going to start a new life. Right. And I get there Monday, and the first day is chest and back.
That's brutal.
Yeah, it's brutal, right? So I get there, and my mind was ready. My body was not. I got to like 8 push-ups or whatever. I couldn't do a pull-up, and I just laid in the ground. And, wouldn't you know, Tuesday, I'm like, oh, okay, I'll put this in. It's plyometric, something different. And you're like, oh, my gosh,
you're just ready to throw up.
Right. And so you get to the end of the week, and you're like, well, I'm going to start again next week. Or I'll start again next month. And then I'll start again maybe at the end of the year. Yeah. And that went on for me for several months until, and this is why I share this story. There is a point, I promise. I found my why. And my why at that time wasn't to like get ripped or get jacked. I mean, that would have been I ended up in pretty darn good shape. But I realized what happened, Scott, was that I'd go to basketball games with my kids were really little, and I would see like an older dad or a guy in his 40s or 50s like struggling to go up the stairs.
You didn't want to be
that guy. I'm like, I can't be that guy. So my why became really powerful. And my why was my kids. I want to model good behavior and model this lifestyle. And so reason why I say that is when you can hone into your why you wake up every day and why anybody else should care, it'll help you get to the hows and the whats. Right? It really will, because discipline sucks. Let's face it. Like, it's just the reality. Discipline's hard. It's hard to be disciplined.
It's the worst part of my job. I say it all the time.
Yeah.
It's the part I hate the most.
Yeah. So anyway, so I gave you a long story for a short question, but I think the why, I mean, the bottom line, without a why, there's a pretty good chance you're going to quit at whatever it is you're going to do, right? Almost every time.
Absolutely. If you don't have that honed in, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You could, just like you said, doing the P90X program or doing a project at work or whatever. It doesn't matter if you don't have a good, clear, attainable why and understand and have a good vision of what that why is and why you want to get to where you get there. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So you got to hit it. How do you go about doing this then? The whole influencing act and influencing others. It's definitely and I would say, and I'll add on the caveat that I'm sure there's a balance there and a thin line to walk along so that it doesn't come across maliciously, because it can easily get taken as malicious intent too, right? So how do you, one, I guess 2 questions here. One, how do you influence others? And 2 is, how do you do it so that it looks ethical and doesn't come across as being malicious?
Yeah, I tell you what, so I just got off a training that I did, and the first 2 stages that I go through in influence, because influence, you're right, can be very misconstrued in the sense that it's manipulation, or, I mean, think of companies that influence on the negative side of things, right? I mean, influence can be good or it can be bad, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Just like anything, though.
Absolutely, like anything. And so the first 2 things that I work with teams and groups on with influence, number one, and it sounds very simplistic, but it's vital, it's foundational, it's modeling behavior.
Yeah.
What are you modeling? It all comes down to integrity, right? Doing the right things for the right people at the right time. And you can look at, situation after situation. But when we look at integrity, Scott, I think oftentimes, I don't know, if I was in a room of 100 people and I was giving a keynote speech and I said, how many of you have integrity? I'm guessing that 99 people would raise their hand, right? We all have integrity. I mean, no, I'm a jerk. But the thing with integrity that's so powerful is that it's the small things. Right. It's the small things that determine often the large things. And so, whether it's me in the insurance business, I could look back years ago and I had a very nice account that I was getting ready to write. It was, very profitable and very good for my family. And it was, and we wrote the account, but long story short was that I found out there were some things the last day before we got this thing wrapped up that I had some misinformation. And my choice was, do I go back to a company underwriter and say, there was a couple things that weren't right, which might change the price or may even change me writing this account? Or Do you just say, it's not that big a deal? And, to me, there's no such thing as business ethics. There's just ethics.
Yeah.
Right. You just, some people say, well, I'm going to be different in business than I am in life. Well, of course, as you know, today, especially with social media and everything else,
that does not work out well.
You are who you are, right? All the time. And it doesn't mean we're perfect. We all make mistakes. But when you talk about how do you influence, well, it all starts with that. To me, that's so foundational. Again, I say the small things. It was just last week, a couple weeks ago, I don't know. I was at our small little grocery store. And I get there, and like most people, like me, I pull in the parking lot and I sit there, and then I grab my phone and start looking at emails. And I look up, and there's a guy coming out with a shopping cart with stuff in it, right? And he gets to his truck, and he throws the stuff in his truck and gets inside and just drives away and leaves the shopping cart just right there, right? And I was just thinking to myself, like, I don't want to be judgmental, but I'm like, dude, like, it's 10 feet away. Go put the shopping cart away, right? And I thought, well, maybe he had an emergency, or, I'm thinking, no, he didn't. And the reason why I say this is because I'm thinking to myself, would that be a person that would have positive influence most of the time? I don't know. Maybe he had a bad day. You never know. But again, it's like, if you're not faithful in the small things, you're not going to be faithful in the big things. And the second part, just to answer your second part of the question, I think it was part 2, was when I look at motivation and influence, most people think motivation is like yelling, screaming, being at the top of the mountain, having the megaphone.
Yeah.
Right. And real motivation is truthfully having faith in people, listening to people, and understanding people. And, a lot of the great leaders, the great influencers, they understand that. It doesn't mean there's not a time to teach, right, or a time to train, but they really understand people, and understanding people. When you understand people, you have great influence. I mean, think about people, Scott, I don't know about you, but if you think about people that have been most influential to you in your life, I mean, sure, they taught you stuff, but I'm guessing they probably understood you and listened to you, right? And those kind of
Absolutely. Things. They're all, people, right? Ironically, the best influencers are those who actually understand people. Imagine that, right?
Yeah, right. It's crazy. But you think about business, that's not how a lot of people either trained or act.
No.
Right?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the businesses, their motivation, well, I say unfortunately, but I get the real reasons, the bottom line is the one that drives all. And unfortunately, sometimes it's not the best people per se that are ones that are driving that bottom line.
Yep.
And yet they get all the attention and so on and so forth. So just change gears a little bit, and we're talking about people and stuff like this. So why don't we talk a little bit about who we influence and who do we want to spend our time influencing in the first place? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, the question of who do I influence, it seems like kind of obvious, right? Well, who do I, but really, when I'm working with groups and I ask this question, they have to stop and think about it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, who are you, especially in business? I mean, if you're at home, of course you want to influence your family or whatever it may be, your close friends. But in the work environment, again, who is it? Who do you want to influence? Is there someone on your team? Is it your clients? Is it your prospects? Is it who knows? And so what I do, and this is something, if people listen to this, is something you can do. It's a very simple but powerful exercise, is list the top 3 characteristics of people you want on your team. Right. And when I say your team, again, maybe if you're a salesperson, could be your clients, but if you work in an organization, or who do you want on your team? The top 3 characteristics of people you want on your team. And then ask yourself, do you possess those characteristics? Right? Because there's something called the law of magnetism, that we attract who we are, right? In a lot of sense. And so if for example, if I'm a business owner and I want to attract someone who is a hardworking go-getter, and I like to take vacations, 15 weeks out of the year and just sit around and be lazy, guess what?
Not going to happen.
Yeah, you're not going to attract those. So the who is so important, not just in who we want, but understanding ourselves. And we all have our own strengths and weaknesses. I know that at some point you got to surround yourself with people that compliment you, right, where you're not good. But when you look at who you want to attract into your inner circle, or people you want on your team, you got to be very conscious of your characteristics that you portray. And if there's characteristics that you want that you don't have, you might want to work on those. Just something to keep in mind.
You ever, do you fall along the lines of the same principles that you're the average of basically the 5 people you hang out with the most? Do you feel this would tie into that topic?
I think it does to a degree, Scott. Yeah. I mean, there's all different aspects of that. I mean, I know I've heard that, many, many different times, whether it was what Jim Rohn or Charlie Tremendous Jones or people that say those things. I think what Charlie Tremendous Jones said, you'll be the same person in 5 years, except for the people you hang out with and the books that you read.
Mm-hmm.
And again, part of that is what do you feel in your head? And I think it's really powerful. I got, one of the most powerful personal development books ever, Think and Grow Rich, right? I got that from a mentor of mine who, when I was in college, I was doing an internship and I got it and I read it at the time and I was like 22 and I'm like, oh yeah, weird, and then as I got older, I read it again. I'm like, it kind of makes sense. And I'm just rereading it now again. And it's funny how much even more significance it has because you get to know yourself. And of course, he talks about in that book, the power of the mastermind, right? That when two minds come together, a third more powerful mind is created. And so I can tell you in my business, I've really worked hard on surrounding myself with people that will challenge me and encourage me, right? I don't want people that just pat me on the back all the time. I want people that will call me out, but they do it in a spirit of love because we all want to get better together. And it's amazing too, when you have those conversations, just like, even just doing this podcast, right? We're both interested in personal development and growth and leadership. It's amazing what things happen when people have these conversations. So I would add one more thing to that. And when I mentioned the books that you read, let's face it, the world's pretty negative.
Oh yeah, man, it's crazy.
It's just, I've written articles that basically like, stop watching the news. And I get a lot of pushback like, well, how would I know what's going on? And you need to be educated. And, I get that. I don't think I'm dumb to the world, but how many things do we input in our head and our subconscious that we have no control over?
It's unbelievable. Can't even think about it. I can't even fathom because it's so large, right?
Yeah. And we sit and I worry about it. What if this? And again, it's okay to be knowledgeable, but here's the good news. If people doubt me on the news thing, like all you need is like a 5-minute browse on Twitter, right? Or go to one website. You can get all caught up in about 3 to 4 minutes. You're all good. And go back to something else. I
got my Google News feed, which with all the main topics I care about, and I scroll through that, and it's probably maybe 3 articles out of the 50 that are there I'll actually pop open to read, right? Other than that, no. Not interested.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I wouldn't say we got off topic here. We're in a little side tangent. It's all good.
It's me.
Yeah, me too. Squirrel. Here we go. You actually started looking, which was even funnier, which people will never see. So we're just talking. We talk about who we influence now. How many people should we influence at a time? Is there a magic? I wouldn't think there would be a magic number. Obviously, I always say everything is situational based, but how would you go about, describing how many people someone should influence at a time?
Yeah. There's no magic number, right? It's not, 1,462 people. That's the number you should influence. No, the thing of how many, when we talk about influence, is I think that the premise behind it, Scott, is that we all influence someone, right? We all have influenced someone, but very few people influence a lot of people. And I think, one of my passions is if I can help, I talk about modeling and motivation and building leaders. Those are the people that we want to influence a lot, right? Because it's like sometimes the bad people do all the influencing and all the good people are like, well, no, I'll just stay quiet and I don't want to rock the boat and I'll be humble. And it's like, no, like we need you. We need leaders. And I think part of that, I talk a lot about, and again, I don't know all the prior guests you've had, but one of the things that I'm part of the John Maxwell team. I didn't mention that up front, but I'm certified partner with the John Maxwell team.
Great set of books.
John's got some great content. His whole team is great. And one of, the number one leadership book of all time in sales. In fact, I didn't even know this until a little bit ago. If you took leadership books 2 through 5 and combine the sales, they still don't equal the number one book, which is 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. That's as far as sales go. Now, what's the number one law, the number one book from the number one leadership guy? Well, it's the law of the lid. And, the law of the lid basically just says your effectiveness is determined on how well you lead. So the question of how many do I lead determines how good a leader are you? Like, are you going to work on it? And so I think there's two things that come in with that how many. And this with a lot of leaders is people have to have the desire to change, right? Because to lead more people, you got to be able to be flexible. You got to be able to change what you're doing because we got to adapt to the world.
You got to employ different methods, I would say, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the phrases I love is that, people all say they want change, but we resist being changed. Yeah, I'll go into organizations and I'll say, how many here want positive change? Oh, we want it.
Everybody,
better, right?
Yeah.
And then start asking questions like, well, here's a couple of things I think we need to do. They're like, oh, we've never done it that way before. That's not the way we do it. And I'm like, okay, see, you're missing the change part. All right. You got to do that. And the other part is I think great leaders always have a desire to grow. Another one of John's book that I love is the 15 Inviolable Laws of Growth. And, he talks about the very first one there is about being intentional with leadership and intentional with your growth, is that growth doesn't happen by accident. Right? You don't just wake up like, because today, whatever day, again, when people are listening to this, but I mean, if it's Saturday, I'm not going to be better on Sunday just because I woke up. Right? It doesn't, I mean, maybe you had a new experience, but what are you doing with it? So I think you got to be very, very intentional in wanting to grow. And so when I say how many to influence, I don't think there's a number. I just think every leader needs to look at themselves, be willing to change and be willing to grow. And when they're able to do that, they'll see their influence increase.
Yeah, that's all great. And I think as well, my point of view is that not only are we talking with people, but as well, how many organizations do you influence is another key thing, which people need to take in consideration, right? Especially if you're, in the insurance world, I'm sure you're dealing with all kinds of different types of organizations out there when you're dealing with your clients, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah, absolutely.
It's not just for the listeners out there. To me, and obviously I'm hearing from you too, Brent, is that it's not just people, but as well organizations on top of that. So just moving along here, and when should we be looking at influencing others? When is there a key time, or when would someone who's brand new, going through starting their leadership career, I would say, when would they know when is the right time to start influencing someone?
Yeah, that's a great question, Scott. I mean, I think you look at influence. Not all times are created equal, right? I mean, that's I think really the foundation of that question is not all times are created equal. There are certain times when we have more influence, and again, I can only use my experience, but I can tell you certainly in the insurance world, there are certain times, in particular with prospects and clients, when what I say and do is much more influential than others. If I call someone on a billing change, I'm not very influential. If I call them after their house burnt down, right? And what am I doing there? That's a very important time to lead, right? And to have influence. That's what we're there for. So I would just say this, the great leaders are readers. And I don't mean just readers of books. I mean readers of people. Yeah. They sense moments. They sense times. And I wrote some of this down. There's three things I think leaders sense. They sense teachable moments. Right. There's a time to teach. There's a time to shut up. Right. We talked about, we talked about listening at the beginning. There's a time where you just don't talk. You just listen. Yeah.
You listen, or you let that person go and get the experience. Right.
Absolutely. And then maybe, and sometimes like what leaders do is there's a situation where, someone is experienced something. Maybe they're not doing it the way that you would do it or you want to do it. But instead of letting them to go through that experience, you interrupt and say, no. Versus letting them go through that as a great coach does and have the experience and then ask them questions about it. And then that's a teachable moment, right? Because they can really grasp that. So I think that is huge. Teachable moments. Number two is there's breakthrough places. I think all of us get stuck at different places in our lives. And I think great leaders know, they sense that, right? They sense that person is stuck. And again, if you're around people more often, you get that and you go, that's a time that I can help them break through that. And the final time is leaders sense catalyst moments, right? There's catalyst times when, whether it's a business ready to explode, right, in a good way, like grow, or a person ready to take off into a different position, or what they're doing is one of those catalyst times. I jokingly, and I'm not going to sing for your podcast, but there's a lot of.
Oh, please do.
Maybe I will. I don't know. I'll just come out of it. But I always joke when I do trainings, and I try to have a lot of humor when I do that. And I said, it reminds me of a great hymn. And I said, maybe it's not a hymn, but it's a song. And it goes something like this. You got to know when to hold them. You get it, right? Know when to fold them, know when to walk away. And that, to me, that's what leaders do, is they know the right times of when to take action and when to pull back. And there isn't I don't think there's like every situation is so unique and different. So you got to use intuition. But I know myself, I've been around great leaders when they've let me make mistakes, and I've learned more from that. And there's been times when, they saw me really struggling and I was stuck, and they hopped in and helped me. Right. But you got to know which time is the right time.
Do you feel that there's a correlation between allowing people, more reins, a correlation between risk and how much reins a leader gives their people in this way?
Yeah. Yes. I think a lot of that, to me, Scott, comes back to, do you have the right people? There's so many factors there, because every situation is different. As how much wiggle room do we give this person, for example, right? It could be a lot of different answers to that. I think if it goes back where you truly trust people, like you trust they have the best intent, and they want the best for themselves and their business and for you, you can certainly give them more wiggle room. Yeah. I think if you're always feeling like, I better jump in because I don't trust this person, that's a bigger problem.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, that's bigger problem.
I mean, obviously if the risk is high, if the person fails, then you'd be a little bit more direct coaching style advice. Yep. If the risk is low, then you kind of let him let's let him go. And if he fails, then we can, sit back and have what we refer to as after action reviews and just go over the points that type of correlation.
Absolutely. The last thing you want to do is throw someone, out to the wolves, right? No. That's the other thing. I mean, again, I can use this, again, my personal experience is, I started in the insurance world at the age of 22 right out of college, and I was a commercial lines producer, meaning I went to business owners, right? And if I were thrown into like a Fortune 500 business to do their insurance stuff, I would have been eaten alive. I would have quit in a week, right? Because I just didn't have the capability. I hadn't grown to that level yet. And so I think it's a great point you bring up, Scott. I think there's that balance of knowing how do you push, right? How do you get people to, take a little bit of a risk, but not put everybody in jeopardy, right?
Yep.
So that's a great point.
Yeah, as they say, experience is the best teacher.
Yeah.
Just change gears, and we're still talking about influence. Obviously, I guess the final real big question on this topic would be where would we influence others?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with that idea of where do we influence others is that most people, including myself, for a long period of time, I never thought of myself as a leader. Mm-hmm. I told you I was an insurance agent for 15 years, and yes, I had some responsibilities. Yes, I had a team, but I wasn't the owner for those years. And because of that, I'm like, well, who am I? I'm just an agent. That's right. And I think, if we truly believe, and I believe that leadership is influence, and influence is leadership, title, position, all that stuff doesn't matter.
No.
Right. You can lead from anywhere. Right. And I think I love this. The position doesn't make the leader makes the position. I think there's a few mistakes that people make. And one of those is what I just mentioned, that if I'm not on top, I don't have influence. I can't lead anybody. And I worked with an organization just last year, and it was a small organization, about 12 people. And I was talking to one of the people. She was the daughter of the owner, but she had no actual executive position. She had no ownership in the business. But we had a conversation. She said, "Listen, can we talk kind of off the record?" And I said, "Well, sure." She goes, "Listen, if I left, everyone would follow me." Right? And she had no ownership, which again proves the point that leadership is not a position; it's influence, and this is true. And people that listen to this could probably have been part of an organization or seen it where. Maybe it's not the CEO, maybe it's not the VP, maybe it's not whatever, but someone understands influence, has all the, has the leadership. The other one too is this, is that a lot of people say, well, when I get to the top, Scott, when I ascend,
when I get there.
Yeah, when I get there, which I don't know, that may be a year, that might be 5 years. When I get there, then I'm going to learn to be a great leader. right? Then I'm going to figure out what this is all about.
No.
And that doesn't work either, right? I
No.
mean, you've got to prepare now for what's going to occur. And if you don't do that, that opportunity will never happen. I think a lot of people talk about luck, whether you believe in luck or not. I think luck is being prepared, right, when that opportunity presents itself.
Yeah.
And, there's some people that say, well, he got lucky. Yeah, he had the opportunity, but he was prepared to take advantage of that opportunity. I know I've had situations where I wasn't prepared. And I'll give you a case in point. Like 6 months ago, this didn't happen. It wasn't like an actual event, but I had a mentor of mine who he's my speaking mentor. I do speaking. And we had a conversation. I got on the call and I said, I want to speak. And he said, great, speakers speak, go speak. And I said, great. And he said, let me ask you a question, Brent. He goes, if tomorrow I had a company that would pay you $10,000 to come and deliver a dynamite 45-minute keynote, are you ready? And I'm like, well, can you give me a week? And he said, no, tomorrow. And I said, honestly, no, I get it. And he's like, no, prepare now like the opportunity's here. And then guess what'll happen?
It'll present itself.
That opportunity will present itself. And wouldn't you know it, like 2 months ago, when it was, where were we at, May? I was at a pretty large conference, an event. I came as a guest. I didn't come as a speaker, as a trainer, but I know the guy who organized it and runs it. And the end of the first day, he comes to me, and this is so funny with how things work, right, in life. He said, listen, he goes, I know you're a speaker. I want to see what you got. Would you be open to doing about a 30, 45-minute training to my guys tomorrow? And I'm like, yeah, I'm ready, right? Because I had that conversation. I prepared myself. So that's to me how leadership and influence works. Is whatever it is that you want, prepare for like you're already there. Right. And even though maybe you don't have that position, so to speak, or that opportunity yet, prepare like you're already there.
That's yeah. I think that it's not only just influence, but life in general. You could go with those words, right? Just being prepared for whatever it is you want, and plan that it is there in front of you. Those are all great points, Brent. And wow, we actually flew through these. We flew through these. I wouldn't say list of questions, but topics so fast.
It was my monster drink.
Yeah, it was your monster drink. I do have a question though that I'd like to throw at you, which you're not prepared for at all. And what do you think makes a great leader? That's a question I throw at all my guests.
I love that question. Oh, because there's so many things. Yeah. Okay. So what makes a great leader? I think this, and this is actually going to go back to what we said earlier. And I'm not saying it because I already answered it, but whether you want to call it why or belief, right? Because I can tell you that I've had, and I say this from the South side of leadership more than anything. I've worked for different people, and there's a difference between people that truly believe in the cause and the mission of what they're doing. I'll follow them. I will follow them. They can make mistakes. They can say the wrong things. They can stumble. But if I know they're true to what they really believe in the cause, I'll follow them. Right. So to me, that is what makes a great leader, is that they truly understand their mission and their purpose. And when they do that, again, I'm with you, right? I'm with you, because I've had waffly leaders before, and you're like,
yeah, haven't we
right?
all?
And they could say the right things, and they could give but you feel it, right? I mean, it's just like, what's the phrase that people can hear your words, but they feel your attitude?
Yeah,
I think that is so true. Great leaders have that. There's, what do you call it? Charisma, attitude, presence. I don't know what it is, but that all exudes because they wake up every day with a mission and a purpose. And that's a person I'll follow any day of the week.
That's awesome. Brent, I'd like to thank you for coming out and joining me on the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. Where can people reach out to you if they want to learn more about influencing others, or have you come out and speak at a moment's notice, or so on and so forth?
Yeah, I'm ready to go speak. Come hire me right now. The best place is just go to my website. It's got everything there. It's BrentMKelly.com. BrentMKelly.com. It's got all my links to social media, and you can contact me there. I'm at Twitter and LinkedIn and all those places. You can just search my name and find me. But if you go there, I would love to say that Brent M. Kelly is because the M is like special and important. But the reality is, like many people, in 2011, when I got my domain name, someone took Brent Kelly. So I went with the M in the middle.
Awesome. For the readers or listeners out there, I should say, I'll have all that up in the show notes, of course. So you just go to movingforwardleadership.com/podcast/Kelly, and that will be all those links, including his website and Think and Grow Rich. Everything that we discussed on the podcast today will be in there. Brent, again, thank you for taking your time. I know this is a bit of a time in the making, but it was definitely worth it in my mind. And other than that, thanks for coming out.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey, everybody. Now, wasn't that a great show with Brent Kelly? What a great guy. We definitely had a lot of fun before and after the show, and not to mention the show itself. So anyway, the key takeaways I wanted to give to you today, 3 of them that I have right now written down is, first off, I wanted to talk about was speck of time, which he talked about at the beginning. And I think that's pretty important. And it's not about leadership. I think it's life philosophy in general, actually, in that our time is so short. So why not make the most of it? Why not try to continually improve and make things better? Hence, actually, one of the elements behind the whole name of moving forward leadership, i.e. making things better. Keep moving forward. Keep getting better. So, speck of time. Our time is definitely our most precious asset, so we shouldn't take advantage of it. The next thing I wanted to talk about was real motivation and understanding people, and I think that's absolutely critical for any leader or anybody to understand. If you plan on influencing people, you have to understand people, and you have to you have to be a people person. And if not, then you need to work on that, because as you saw throughout the whole 6 questions that I asked them about influencing people, understanding people is definitely a relevant theme throughout all of them, because if you don't understand people, you're not going to be able to effectively influence them. And then the final key takeaway I'd like to point out was the whole topic we got onto of teachable moments. And I think this is, important for a leader to understand and have a grasp on when to go ahead and use those teachable moments. What is a teachable moment? When do they exist, right? And what you can do to help teach your subordinates, or teach anybody really that you're influencing. So just think about that for a moment, right? Teachable moments, and look at your day to see, are there times in just your normal daily routine where there could be teachable moments for your people? So that's my 3, key takeaways for this this podcast today. Speck of time, real motivation and understanding people, and then as well, teachable moments. I hope you enjoyed the show. I definitely had a lot of fun in recording it for you. Again, if you enjoyed this podcast and this episode and the rest of the episode, please, I ask you to go ahead and leave me a review on iTunes, Google Play Music, whatever, however you're listening to this podcast. It really doesn't matter to me. And feel free to share. Share the links, share the show notes links, share the Facebook page, the group, or whatever. Okay, let's expand the audience so that more people like yourselves get some positive influence out of this. That's all for today. Hope everybody's doing well. And remember, keep trying, keep pushing, and keep moving forward. Take care now.